eventually I managed to get some plasterboard. Now, I suppose it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. We're working in the UK plasterboard industry. I know that plasterboard's on allocation over there. Finding plasterboard here is proving to be quite difficult. A couple of years ago when I built a utility in the house, they sold 900 by 1800, sort of 6 foot by 3 foot boards of plasterboard that are just perfect to go in the back of the car. No one's selling them at the moment. So probably the plasterboard manufacturers just aren't making them because they're too busy making the larger size for the dry lining industry. Managed to buy some 2.5 metres by 0.6, so it's kind of just over 8 foot by 2 foot wide and 12.5 mil thick. So standard plasterboard, but in 600 mil widths, which is a little bit unusual, certainly for the UK market. The UK market makes the baseboards, the 900, 1200s, but don't make this size. The only thing that's made in 600 wide boards in the UK is what's called core board and plank. Plank is not very widely used these days, and core board goes into the rear of shaft wall system or head deflection details. So I've managed to find some board, as I've said. I just thought, seeing that it was my industry, first of all, give you a little rundown. So what's interesting on the back of these boards is, and what interests me, because I'm a bit nerdy when it comes to plasterboard. So this is made by Knauf, company I know well. I worked for them for 16 years. Actually, that was produced in factory 20, maybe, I'm guessing. In the UK, it would say 1 or 2 on from Knauf, which is the Sittingbourne or the Immingham factory. The date of production, which was the 6th of February 23 at 8:25. Every plasterboard that's made can be traced right down to the minute that it's made. That's half of the board, and I'll explain why it's half of the board in a minute. The other half of the board, which is ivory faced, says this on it, which is quite important actually. It says AEN 520. 520 is the European standard, or the BSEN standard, that plasterboard is manufactured to, and it's a type. You see them in the racks. Usually most of what you see is this ivory coloured face, which is a standard type A plasterboard. Then you get soundboards, which is a type D board, which is usually blue in face, fireboards, which is a type F board, which is red in face, and then you do get combinations of boards. So for example, Knauf's fire panel is type A and type F because it's a fireboard, but it's a standard plasterboard, and their sound panel is a type A and type D board. And then you get further permutations where you get a board that does sort of everything almost that you need it to do. So you get a standard board, an acoustic board and a fireboard. For example, in the UK, Knauf have a board called Sound Shield Plus, which is an A, D and an F board. Green boards, which are for moisture resistant properties, is a type H board. So there you go, I thought I'll impart some of my drywall knowledge onto you. Yeah, so I went down to my local builder's merchant and they just don't have any plasterboard. It's just like Mother Hubbard's cupboard down there. And I went to another one this morning who was advertising it online. They've got nothing. They're totally sold out. And then I was driving into the centre of town and I passed a builder's merchant I'd never been in before called Big Matt. And I pulled in there because I could see in their sheds from the road that they had some. So I went in there, no one else in the shop, very helpful people. Not only sold me the 5 sheets I need at a very reasonable price, much cheaper than I was prepared to pay at the DIY centres, but also he put his forklift trucks up to the back of the car so I could cut it in half and put it in the car. I took a little cutting list with me because I thought I would have to do that. So I'm hoping these are cut and will go on the frames quite easily. Anyway, that's a little bit of a backstory. Let's get back to building. Anyway, going somewhere new gives me an excuse to practice my slightly improving French. The French word for plasterboard is plaque de plâtre. So we got sheetrock in the US, probably I'm guessing Canada as well, plasterboard in the UK, plaque de plâtre in France. And I think the German word is very similar as well to that actually, but anyway, plâtre or something similar. So I've got myself some drywall screws, which are Phillips. I don't know why drywall screws are Phillips. I have this conversation at work on the merits of posi over Phillips, but drywall are Phillips. And when you're putting drywall screws in, you should use a screw gun with a clutch on and not an impact driver. And I'll tell you why in a minute when we start screwing them on. So if I've got my calculations correct, the first board should go from that jamb stud that we fit yesterday to the centre of this stud here. The first one's going to be the one I need to cut some off to let this go down to the middle of the stud. And that needs to go down 95 mil. I'm going to keep it up off the floor about 20, so 95 mil, there we go. For this little cut, I'm just going to put the saw through it to cut that bit. Just do it with a Stanley knife. Have a nice clean knife. My knife matches the plasterboard. That's the beauty of plasterboard, isn't it? It'd be nice if we could cut plywood like this. So I get a 20mm packer, put that in there, centre this up on the stud. You put screws into plasterboard, you should drive the screw in just so it tucks into the paper. You don't want to drive it in so hard that it goes straight through the face of the paper. This is why it's not very good to have an impact driver. It'll just go straight through the face of the paper. So I'll just tack one in at this end, and from the edge of plasterboard your screw should be 10mm. Right, let's just work my... Perfect, like that. And then I'll tack this end on in terms of level. Right, so that's his first one on. Really, from now on, I shouldn't have too much cutting to do other than the end. In a metal frame drywall systems, the studs aren't actually fixed. They're sat loose in the tracks, so you can slide them about and align them to the edge of the plasterboard because there's some tolerance on the plasterboard. Obviously, we've not got a problem here, especially with these really wide studs. We don't have to slide stuff about. Now, the 2.5s, these are just a bit shorter than the end of this wall. I'm going to have to insert an additional stud at that end. Not that I need an additional stud for stability, but just to take this board up. I don't really want to trim this board off and cut 200mm if I then throw 200mm away. There's no point, so I'm just going to put an additional bearer in there to take the end of that board and stop it flapping. What's important though, I'm building here just an aesthetic wall that's got no characteristics. I'm not even going to tape and joint this side. I will in the workshop, but this side is just going to be for storage. It's going to be some shelf units here. If you're doing this for yourself, especially if you're going to build a wall that requires some fire resistance, then you need to build the wall in conjunction with the recommendations of the manufacturers, because the wall that's recommended is what will have been fire tested. In today's world, in light of the tragic events at Grenfell, more and more fire resistant partitions are becoming more and more onerous and more rigorously policed when they're built. A fire rated wall probably wouldn't railroad the boards in the way I'm doing here, and I'm just doing that just because it's the most economical way I can board it. But if this were a fire rated partition, then I wouldn't be doing this. The hell was that? Give me a little bit of acoustics, probably give me, by the time it's boarded on this side, 75mm stud. Probably, there goes the lights again. Probably got somewhere in the region of about 35, 38 dB RW. Since the light, since it's got windy, the lights are just on and off all the time. Okay, so here I'm going to cut it about 20mm short from the top, because as these ladders get pulled in and out, the top of the board will get damaged. I can just put a piece of inch timber in there just as a lip, just to protect the top of the board so it doesn't get all raggedy. And I'm going to do the same, just temporary down the side of the door frame as well to protect the edge of the board. The plasterboard is really prone to getting damaged at sort of first fix while other trades are in and out. The screws are just pulling in, so they're not breaking the paper. If you break the paper, then you should put a new screw in. In terms of the vertical centres and around the perimeter, they should be in at 300mm, the screws. And that you will find when you look at all the manufacturers' fire test data, they're always placed at 300mm centres. there's a stipulation in a document called BS 476, which has largely been superseded with a European classification, but 476 states screws at 300 centres. Actually, what I'm building here, with being a timber stud, it's very hard at the moment to get any fire test data for it, because unlike metal studs, which are manufactured at an exact gauge and exact size time and time again, every bit of timber is slightly different, and a lot of the plasterboard manufacturers don't want to test it. First of all, they're not selling the wood, they're only selling the metal, so they've got very little interest in doing the test. But secondly, from a consistency point of view, it's not very easy. That's that bit done. Oh, and by the way, off camera last night, I fixed all the studs in the permanent position. I'd just tacked them in. I thought I'd just make it that clear. Now I'm just going to have to do a little bit more framing around this end. I didn't finish that off yesterday. I think I'm going to call this video here. I've actually just run out of drywall screws. I need about 10, and I know I've got some, but I need to sift through some boxes under the bench. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give me a thumbs up. And if you've not been here before and would like to see this barn transform into a workshop, then consider hitting the subscribe button. So in the next episode, I'm going to remove the old stud work that's behind this wall, which means that this workshop will be 12-inch larger, and then continue just to frame out that door opening. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.